Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Mukam karati vajra. Our far respectable Spiritual Master, the Lady of the Common Souls, this is mercy dance, the Dhama, different speakers and enables name to cross Shila Gurudev Tiruka Mahasya ki Jai. So we have gathered here today to celebrate 20th Disappearance Day celebration of His Divine Grace H.H.TamalKrishnaGoswamiMaharaj. So, we would like to invite, welcome His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj. Thank you for coming, Maharaj. And His Grace Satyananda Prabhuji. Thank you for coming. Satyananda Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. His Grace Pancharatna Prabhuji. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And His Grace Atul Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for coming. And welcome. And Head Grace Atita Guna Mataji. Thank you for coming. And thank you everyone for coming here and to grace this event, Srila Gurudev's Disappearance Day, and make a successful one. So the program will be, we were going to start with homages, and then at while the homages is going on, we are going to have 1 o'clock offering. So anyone who has brought offering for Srila Gurudev, they can take to the Samadhi, and the offering will be 1 o'clock. And 1:30 will be Pushpanjali with Aarti, Pushpanjali and Aarti, and then 2 o'clock is the feast prasad. Okay. First, I would like to say something. I know most of them, they know why we are celebrating Disappearance Day, because it's a sad day. But for us, it's a glorious day also. Someone asked me, why are you celebrating this Disappearance Day? Because if someone passes away, goes away from you, why you celebrate? So, Thakur Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that he reasons there who tells that Vaishnava died when the heart living is still in sound. The Vaishnavas died to live, and the living tried to spread the holy name of the Lord. So when the Vaishnava leaves this world, we don't say that they died. So they left to the spiritual world to associate with Radha and Krishna. So that's why we are celebrating this. It's natural that sometimes we get emotional and sad about it, but we have to cherish the legacy Srila Gurudev has left for us and relish this moment. Okay. So now I would like to welcome His Holiness to speak the glorification of Srila Gurudev.
Say his name, Bhakti Vigna Vinasa Nrsimha.
Bhakti Vigna Vinasa Nrsimha Maharaj ki jai.
Tadao.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Adi Paschachade Shatari Vanchakaupatarvyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavan Ebhyo Vaishnavilyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I first heard about Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj when he took his sannyas. At that time, I was a young devotee in the UK. I joined the Hare Krishna movement in London in 1971. Tamal Krishna Goswami took sannyas, it must have been 1972. And he took sannyas in the Radha Govinda temple in Jaipur. And he took it on the auspicious day of Vasant Panchami, thank you Prabhu, yes, Vasant Panchami, which is the appearance day of many great acharyas. It's also the disappearance day of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It's also day of Saraswati Puja. So it's a very auspicious day, Vasant Panchami. And Prabhupada initiated him there in the Radha Govinda temple in Jaipur. Prabhupada was doing lectures there in Jaipur, and he chose that day to initiate Tamal Krishna Goswami into the renounced order of life. So many of you were not even, some of you were not even born, and some of you, most of us were, if we were in the movement, we were very new devotees. And he was also, had not been in the movement very long. I think he joined 1968. And so he took sannyas very quickly in his Krishna conscious career. But Srila Prabhupada definitely wanted him to accept the renounced order of life. He saw that Prabhupada's thinking anyway was that in the renounced order of life, he can dedicate himself fully to preaching Krishna consciousness. Of course, previously to that, Tamal Krishna Goswami he was a grihastha. He had married, he'd taken a wife, and at the same time he was traveling and preaching, but it was not so easy. Householder life is, you actually require a home. Grihasthas, they need a griha. They should have a home, they should have some base, some place. So to be traveling and all the time on the go, traveling different places, it's not really how householder life should be. Traveling is meant for the sannyasis and the brahmacharis. The brahmacharis are meant to go and travel with the sannyasis. Therefore, Prabhupada initiated Tamal Krishna into sannyas and gave him the order to go everywhere and preach Krishna consciousness. Actually, when he took sannyas, he was not only giving up the householder ashram, but he was also giving up his responsibility as a GBC man. Because at that time, the GBC were all supposed to be grihasthas or vanaprasthas, but not sannyasis. The sannyasis were initially in Prabhupada's time, in the early 1970s, the sannyasis were just engaged in preaching activities. Tamal Krishna Goswami personally told Subhad Swami. Subhad Swami told me how Tamal Krishna Goswami told him. He said that your duty as a sannyasi is you should give some seminar, or you can write some article like that. This is the business of sannyasis. Not that sannyasis have to get involved so much with temple management and affairs, that's meant to be the work of the Grihastas. They're meant to organize these things and look after the Grihasta people. So Tamal Krishna Goswami gave up his duties as a GBC man. He had actually been the GBC for the whole of India. Of course, in those days, we did not have much in India to be in charge of. It was, we were a very small society. There was one center in Calcutta and one center in Delhi. Both centers were manned by Western devotees. Indian people had not joined our movement in those days. And we had Prabhupada opened the Krishna Balaram temple later. That was still being constructed when Tamal Krishna took sannyas. There was no Hyderabad temple. There was only these few centers. They were trying to develop Mayapur. The Lotus building was opened, I think, what year? 1973? Yes, 1970. He took sannyas 1972. So the Lotus building was not even built. And there was only rice fields here in Mayapur. So Prabhupada had a lot of work to be done. He needed devotees to sacrifice their life. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj did that. He sacrificed his whole life for the service of Srila Prabhupada and his movement. And he really dedicated himself completely to the mission of spreading Krishna consciousness. After taking sannyas, he was here in India, and he was traveling and preaching and helping Prabhupada to develop whatever few things we had going in India. But then he was attracted to go back to the West because he was hearing how preaching was developing more and more in the Western world. And he was hearing how there were many people joining the Krishna consciousness movement. Many young Americans were very ripe and very open to Krishna consciousness. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was inspired to return to America. And it was in New York. I was in New York at the time when Tamal Krishna Maharaj came from India. When he first came from India, he came back to America. And he came to the Brooklyn Temple. Pancharatna Prabhu was there, you will remember. We were in the 439 Henry Street in Brooklyn. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj came there, returning from India, and he brought presents for the deities. I thought it was a very nice gesture. He brought beautiful bottles of sacred water and dust from the holy Dhama, and he had it in a very nice presentation. He offered everything to the deities of Radha Govinda there in New York. And he had similar offerings for other deities like Rukmini Dwarkadish in Los Angeles and Kishore Kishori in Chicago. So it shows you something of his mood of devotion, that he was very, very thoughtful person. And he really thought very carefully about doing everything, and he wanted everything to be done very nicely. He was a very, very expert manager, and Prabhupada knew that. Prabhupada could see the potential in the devotees, and he engaged Tamal Krishna's Maharaj's ability to manage and to take more responsibility in the Krishna consciousness movement. as I said, initially when he took sannyas, but before that he had joined Prabhupada's World Sankirtan party. Prabhupada had a World Sankirtan party, and he had gone to France first of all, and then he came to England, and then from England then they were going to India. Prabhupada told 80 certain devotees who should come, who should go to India. So people like Shamsundar Prabhu and Malati and Guru Das and Yamuna and Mukunda and Janaki, they were to stay in England and maintain the London temple. And Tamal Krishna and his wife, they were to go to India. But then later on he took sannyas, so he gave up that GBC duty, and then he went back to America, and he got to the USA, and he met with his old friend Vishnu Jana Swami. Vishnu Jana was his old friend. They had joined Krishna consciousness together, and Vishnu Jana had become a Swami, and he had a bus, and he was traveling in America. So Tamal Krishna Goswami thought it would be very nice to go with his old friend. So Tamal Krishna Goswami and Vishnu Jana Swami, they became partners, they became a team. And they had some nice, very nice devotees. They had some people who went on, later on in years, to become wonderful devotees. People like Sankarshan Das Adhikari, who we call the Internet Guru. He was on that party with Vishnu Jana and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And then there was also Sahotra Swami. He was also a member of this early party. So some very wonderful devotees had actually come there, and they were traveling together, and they would do wonderful programs together. Vishnu Jana had been something of a musician. He actually played the guitar. Some people say he was a Madanga player, but no, he wasn't a drummer. He was a guitarist. And he could play guitar very wonderful. He was actually with one of the rock groups, Jefferson Airplane or something like that. One of the famous rock groups from the 1960s. So Vishnu Jana was a wonderful devotee, and he would play the tambura, and he would sing, and his singing and playing harmonium and so on, he would just memorize, we'd just become, wow, it's just so wonderful. He would sing so beautifully. Even Prabhupada would remark that this man Vishnu Jana, his voice is so good. So Vishnu Jana he organized the devotees. They had like the bhajan band. They had the bhajan band, and they would go to different places, and especially college towns. In the USA, we have college towns. You know, your big universities, they're like a town. It's a whole township built around the college. And so they would go there, and they would do a festival, and they'd have a nice festival. And they had very nice prasadam. They cooked really nicely. You can read all this. Prabhu has a book here, The Servant of the Servant, which describes about all of these days. It's a very wonderful book, written by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, describing the early days of Krishna consciousness and his preaching with Vishnu Jana especially. So Vishnu Jana and the devotees would do kirtan, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj would look around and see who's into the kirtan. He'd be looking everybody to see, you know, is anybody, you know, maybe they're clapping their hands or stamping their feet or, you know, moving, maybe they're into the kirtan. He'd be looking to see who's really into the kirtan. And then he'd see also who really likes the prasadam, and he would corner these people, and he would talk to them, and he would get them to become devotees. he'd get them to just quit college and just join up and become full-time devotees. One time, while we were in New York, Pancharatna Prabhu will remember, Tamal Krishna Maharaj came from Florida and he had come for the weekend. The New York temple had sponsored his flight to come all the way from Florida to New York for one weekend. And the idea was that he would recruit people to go back to Florida with him to join Radha Damodar. Because Tamal Krishna Maharaj had started, he developed, Vishnu Jan had started, but Tamal Krishna Maharaj came along and he had bigger ideas. Vishnu Jana Swami, his idea was just travel around and do kirtan and preach and sell some books, But Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he thinks big, because he'd been trained by Prabhupada. And Prabhupada trained the devotees, don't think small, think big. Think big. One devotee was telling, I think it was Achurananda, was saying that one time they said to Prabhupada, why don't we just get a little place in Loi Bazaar, in Vrindavan? Let's just get a little place like Radha Damodar temple and make that our temple. And Prabhupada looked at him and said, I cannot think small. I have to do something big. I cannot think in this small way. So Prabhupada was like the pushing, he was really the pusher behind this Krishna consciousness movement. Why? Because he said, my Guru Maharaj pushed me, I am pushing you. This is the parampara. The disciplic succession is like that. The Guru Prabhupada pushed us, we're pushing the new devotees, and the new devotees will go on to push the newer devotees, right? This is the Krishna consciousness movement. We have to go forward. We cannot think small. We have to think in big ways. Tamal Krishna Maharaj liked to do that. He liked to think in big ways. And so he recruited, of course, many people, which was not easy. When you read the book, I read Vyasaki's book also. Vyasaki Prabhu wrote a book about, what's it, Radha Damodar Leela or something? Radha Damodar Vilas. Very good book. And he describes in a lot of detail everything going on with the Radha Damodar party and the difficulties which they had traveling around and recruiting people. It's not easy to bring people, even in the 1960s and 70s, it was not easy to bring people into Krishna consciousness. We're thinking it's difficult today, but even then it was difficult. But still, somehow he would get people to come, he would get people to join the movement. Just like I said, he came to New York for the weekend and he took 3 people back with him. They got 3 people, they picked out 3 young men who looked like good potential, and they sent them to talk to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and after they talked to him, that's it. Okay, we're going to Florida. We'll go with Tamal Krishna Maharaj to Florida and preach and join Radha Damodar. And so he was very dynamic, a very powerful personality. He was the type of person, you sat in front of him, you couldn't say no. Whatever he wanted, he was so powerful and his presence was so bold. You couldn't refuse him, you just you're just very powerful presence. And so he had that Shakti, and he used it for the service of Krishna, to bring people into Krishna consciousness and to get them to do some service for Krishna. So I met him first there in Brooklyn Temple, but then later on, what happened, I was in, it was Prabhupada disappeared, 1977, November 14th, Prabhupada left the world. And then after that, next year, 1978, for some reason, they asked me to go to Hyderabad to be in charge of the temple there. I mean, I don't know why they asked me, but somehow they did ask me to be in charge of the temple there in Hyderabad in 1978. It was a new temple, it had just opened, and there was about 10 devotees there from different countries in the world. It was a very international group, and it's a nice temple. If you see it today, it's very beautiful. So in 1978, the temple had been opened, but it was still basic structure. The construction hadn't really been finished. I remember there was not even a door on the temple. I used to sleep at night and guard the door because we had deities, Radha Madan Mohan, Gornitai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, all big, very big size deities. And so there was no door on the temple, and I used to sleep in front of in the doorway in case anybody ever came there in the night. So I was there for some time, but there was some problem, you know, Prabhupada had left the world, and there was some conflicts between different people. I remember Hansadura Prabhu, he was Hansadura Swami at the time, he was a GBC, and there was some conflicts with different people, so I got kicked out. I got liberated from my managerial stint. And at that he was involved. HHTamal Maharaj told me, he said, just leave everything, come to Mumbai. And he was in Juhu. He was in the Juhu temple. So I came there to Juhu, and I was working with him there. And at one point he wanted me to go to America. I said, oh no, I'm not going to go to America. I don't want to go there. Not for me. I'd been there, I saw America. Anyway, so he left, he went back to America. But then later on, I got the opportunity. I had been in Africa, preaching in Africa, and then I wrote to him, actually what happened, he wrote that book, Servant of the Servant. He'd written that book, it had just come out, and I read it, and I thought, so wonderful, and I wrote to him, and I told him, it's so wonderful, you're preaching, you know, very nice, if I can ever help you in any way. And he said, well, why don't you come and help me in Hong Kong? He said, because you're British. At that time, it was very difficult for Americans to enter Hong Kong. So he said to me, he said, you're British, Hong Kong is a British colony. It's your colony. You should come there and help. And so I met him in Vrindavan at the Kartik, and he gave me money to come to Hong Kong. And I came there to Hong Kong, and that's how I got connected with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. That was must have been 1983, I think. So, you know, he was already initiating, and he had disciples and everything. So he invited me to come there to Hong Kong. I worked in Hong Kong for some time, then he got me to go over to the Philippines, and I spent some years in the Philippines also, which was also his zone. He had taken over the Philippines to develop the preaching in the Philippines. There's many nice disciples there in the Philippines. But while I was in the Philippines, I was always thinking that I really wanted to go to China. That I really came to Tamal Krishna Maharaj because I thought I wanted to go to China. I wanted to help him with the China mission. Now, many devotees wanted to help him with the China mission, but he would, you know, he'd just refuse them. He was not so willing to just let people come and help. Somehow or other, I was fortunate that when what happened, Russia had opened up. There, Russia had been USSR, and then it had broken up into individual countries. What was that called? The
CIS.
Huh?
CIS.
Okay, yeah, USSR became individual countries, and at that time then, the devotees in Russia, they said, what are you doing about China? You have to get going in China. They said, Russia's already opened up. They said, China's going to open up one day, you have to get going in China. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj hadn't really started. He'd gone to China a little, and he looked at China and he thought, impossible, can't do anything here. Multi-tone times, and it's very primitive. If you've seen China as it was in the 1970s, it was really undeveloped. Everybody on a bicycle, and everybody has the same clothes, that jacket with the pockets here, they have that, and they have the hat, that everybody's the communist style, it's the old style. So he went there, he thought, impossible, can't do anything. But anyway, we were sending books. Prabhupada had also told him, said, send the books, and the books will create the field. So many Chinese people were working in Hong Kong in those days. So it was arranged, we would go to the train station and we would give out books to the people going back to China. We'd give them free books. And the book would be learn English from Chinese, it would be Chinese English, and it would be all Krishna's pastimes and things from Bhagavad Gita, like that. And we'd give them these books. And we'd give them out free. Everybody take one back, get the books into China. But then Russia opened up, and then they were saying, you have to get going in China, you have to do something. So then Tamal Krishna Maharaj thought about it, and I was in the Philippines, and he invited me. He said, you came here, you wanted to come to China. He said, now you come this time, you come, and you can go with this other devotee. So there was one devotee in Hong Kong who was Indian-bodied, and he spoke Cantonese. So I went with him, we went to Guangzhou. Guangzhou is a Cantonese-speaking city. So we were there in Guangzhou, and then there were two devotees went to Beijing, and there were two devotees in Shanghai. Actually, in the north there was a devotee, Ekachakra Prabhu, and Jai Baladev Prabhu, who is there in America now. He's an American devotee. Ekachakra could already speak good Chinese. And then in Shanghai we had Sankirtan Prabhu, who could also speak some Chinese because he traveled in China before becoming a devotee. So he picked up some of the language, and he came there with one Swiss friend, and they went to Shanghai. So that's how we began in the China mission. And we would smuggle the books. We had to smuggle the books, somehow carry them in. It was very interesting in those days, trying to get books into China. And just being there in China, we would bring everything. We had to bring our spices, we would bring a hot plate, we'd bring our pots, and we would cook. We would cook for all the devotees. And we were fortunate, actually one man had begun a yoga society. It was a yoga and qigong society. So this man, he got a copy of Zai Hui Lai, right? Zai Hui Lai, coming back, means coming back. So he got a copy of the Coming Back, the Science of Reincarnation. And this man was a Buddhist, and he read the book, and he said, I want to help you teach this all over China. He was a very nice man. He was been brought up a Buddhist, very big, tall man. Then now he's a monk, he's a Buddhist monk, and he often comes for our programs in Guangzhou. When we have programs, we'll invite him, and he will come as a Buddhist monk. And he's very nice, very respectful. And he loved Gurudev, he loved Tamal Krishna Maharaj very much. And So he said, I want to help you teach this all over China. And he was the president of the Yoga Qigong Society. So I said, well, I know yoga, I can teach you all yoga, you know. So we had they thought, oh, very nice. So they arranged visas, and I was teaching a little yoga and a lot of chanting of Hare Krishna. And every day we'd cook prasadam, and the students would come from the college, and they'd take prasadam with us every day. And it was really a nice program. But then, 1989 came, June 4th, Lu Si, alright? 6 months, the 4th day of the 6th month, 1994. There was Tiananmen, the big square in Beijing. There was a student uprising. And then the military came and crushed everything and cracked down on the whole country. So they cracked down the whole country, so they said, you better go. Not safe anymore. And there was so much, it was so dangerous times. So we had just printed the Bhagavad Gita in Chinese. We just printed it. But then the government officials came and they said, oh, this is not legal. We said, no, it's legal. We paid everything. We showed them all everything. They said, no, not legal. They said, we're taking all the books. We're confiscating all the books. So that's China. Sometimes it's like that. You know, even you do everything legally, they'll say, no, not legal. So all the books, we managed to keep a few, but most of the books, we lost them. And our yoga society got banned. They're promoting religion. And the Buddhist man who helped us to spread Krishna consciousness, he was in jail for a little while. So this was the beginning of our era, our entry into China. It was a bit like this. It was up, down. Sometimes you think you're going forward, oh, we're going to conquer the whole country, everybody's going to become devotee. Next minute, out. Get out, nobody's there. So very difficult. And HHTamalKrishnaGoswamiMaharaj, even he went there, they had a big program in Shanghai, very big program, very successful. We do a little yoga, and then we teach them the Maha Mantra, and teach them Kirtan. And you know, they're like, they just love it, you know, give everybody books, everybody gets a free book, you know. But the only problem was, like, the next day the police came and arrested everybody. So HHTamalKrishnaGoswamiMaharaj also, he was also there, and he also got arrested, and the devotees from Shanghai, the people who were in Shanghai, they all got sent back to Hong Kong. We were still in Guangzhou, but they've done this big program, very big, but difficult, you know, because everything you do, people know what you're doing. You can't really be secret. You have to be prepared that people are watching you, and they're informed, they're going to, you know, they're government people are everywhere. So, have to be very careful. Anyway, we kept going. We had to be out. We left there. Was it 19? Must have been 89, right? Lu Si. Injio Bajo Niana. Bajo. Yeah, 89. Yeah. 1989. So we came out. We were outside for a couple of years, and then went back to China. Come back. I got a job teaching. I took a job teaching English in the university, to teach there, in different places. I could be with some devotees, I could give them some association and cook for them and stuff. Then later on, gradually make more and more friends. You don't know who's going to be devotee. You just give mercy. You go to these places, you have to be very merciful. That's very important. I'm preaching in the third world for maybe 40 years in the third world countries, and you have to be merciful, you have to be willing to give. When you go there to give, you don't come to take anything, but you come to give. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj had that mood also. He gave his whole life for the service of Krishna. So we're very fortunate to honor him. I miss him very much. Hare Krishna. Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki.